Sorry. So welcome to HTX Sports Tech Founder Series with Mike Brown, founder of Win-Win. We're here along with Ash DeWalt and Chris Garcia, help you work our innovation partner. Mike, just wanted to kick off the conversation with you, sharing a little bit of info about yourself and how Win-Win was created.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, guys, Nate, Ash, Chris, thanks for having me. Such a phenomenal thing you guys are doing. And even in the midst of COVID-19, pivoting like all innovators must do at this time. So I appreciate you guys doing this, and I'm happy to be a part and share what little, insight and knowledge and experience that I've had in this whole tech startup game. So, a little bit of background for me, born and raised in Houston, from A-Leaf to be exact. So shout out to the SWAT. I took my talents out to the East Coast for college, Duke University. I was an early graduate, public policy, but did a little bit of playing some football. I was a two-time All-American, led the nation in tackles. And, once I graduated early, went on to play in the NFL, had some time there, and, ultimately made this transition from tackling to tech. And I think that's really where my career, if you will, started. For me, it was a lot of fun kind of going from that and applying my same level of focus and intensity into a new field, one that I had never heard of. And so I went out to Silicon Valley after teaching myself how to code several coding languages, design, and had one goal. And this was in 2014, which was to start a tech company after learning what I had learned. And coming from Houston, where that wasn't a very big topic at the time, I was excited to kind of jump into the mecca of it all. And, long story short, started Win-Win, which I'll touch on here in a bit. But then ultimately, 5 years after getting to Silicon Valley, started hearing about what was really going on in Houston and the ecosystem, because you typically just heard about Austin. And so I was thrilled and excited to know about the work that was being done, the tracks that were being laid, from the bottom up, to even to the top where the mayor's office and other entities were involved. So brought Win-Win back home, and have been loving it ever since. And so just to go back to Win-Win, we started that based on really our understanding of what innovation is, right? And really solving problems. And there was a problem that I recognized back in 2016 where fantasy sports and other gaming elements were really not driving as much value directly to the athletes who were involved there. And me being a former athlete, I recognized, what athletes value, particularly outside of money, which is our ability to impact the world in a positive way. And so I was able to kind of combine giving with that element of gaming to create a platform that really defines a win-win, right? Because our platform, which I'll get into, allows for athletes and influencers, and now even teams and entities of influence, to raise money for charitable causes in a very efficient way. It allows fans of players and teams to engage with that athlete or that team in a more unique way through gaming, while being able to support that cause and winning things that typically they wouldn't even be able to access. And it all is done in a way that's fun and engaging, which is very attractive for millennials, which is a big kind of land grab from a charitable organization standpoint in terms of donors and their involvement. So that's kind of the spiel on myself and the high level on Win-Win and where we are.
Since you moved back, it was about almost like exactly a year ago. How have you seen Houston's innovation been helpful for Win-Win?
Yeah, it's been great. We were welcomed with wide open, warm arms. For those who don't know, our recruitment, if you will, and relocation down to Houston was led by the Cannon Ventures, Lawson Gal, and John over there and their team that they built out, phenomenal team, and that was back in end of 2018 when that started, when I met them. And that's when I first, I'm like, wait, hold on, Houston's doing what? And it was the first time that I ever had any mention of it that I heard of, but there was already work being done. And so from that point, basically I was coming down to Houston, and that's where I had the great fortune of meeting you three gentlemen, really, in a way that that kind of sealed the deal for me, right? Because I remember, coming down all right, let me see what they're talking about, because I'm in the mecca of it all, and I know what this thing needs to look like, and who the type of people are that need to be involved. And so after meeting you three gentlemen, we've stayed obviously very connected, and seeing how you envision Houston from a tech and innovation and startup standpoint. And let's not beat around the bush. The fact that, we're minorities, right? And you guys are minorities, and leading that charge, and me understanding even the racial and cultural makeup of Houston, right? And how much that can positively impact an innovation ecosystem, that was a lot for me. So once I got down here, like you said, a year ago, have been staying connected, a ton of support, from individual entities like the Cannon, obviously individuals like yourself, being able to meet amazing entrepreneurs, like the guys over at Explosion or at Grind, just meeting hungry young entrepreneurs, even folks, that are a little even further down on the road, in terms of what they're doing. So it's been great. It's really felt good to have that support coming down here, and really being a part of a mission that's even bigger than just our company and ourselves, right? Because I bought into Houston and its ecosystem as a whole, right? Whereas in Silicon Valley, it's kind of, you got to get out there and get it how you live the best that you can. But to not only get it how you live here, but then to have everybody really coming together to make that happen has been amazing. So even with the midst of COVID-19, we've got to see a preview of the tech rodeo, right? And I see a huge opportunity there, kind of becoming the new South by Southwest interactive, right? And I'm claiming that, and having you guys running HTX, I can only be even more excited about what's to come.
Well said, man.
Let's see. Ash, did you want to jump in? You're mute, Ash.
All right,
So Mike, so can you tell us, man, like you had a tremendous amount of success on the platform Republic. Can you kind of dive into that and kind of share like what were some of those best practices? What were some of the things that you did that you executed on to make that such a successful campaign as far as raising funds for your venture? Can you kind of give it like some insight on that?
Absolutely, man. Crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, let me be clear. Equity crowdfunding, I think, is an amazing tool for any entrepreneur, any founder, specifically, minorities, right? And then let me also be clear, like this is not like GoFundMe or any go crowdfunding, right? Equity crowdfunding, you have people investing, but to be able to open the door to your ship, if you will, and allow non-traditional investors come in a big way, I think is amazing. So when I went on Republic, and which is a great team there, we had a lot of support, and they're uniquely focused on supporting minority, particularly Black founders, right? And they're doing some innovative things in terms of partnerships, and even some of the ways that they operate, supporting us specifically. So the way that we found success, was, I'll be honest, it's some work. It is work. Like, there's this mantra of like, just put it out there and people will flock to you with their money. It's not at all the case. And so, honestly, we had to approach it like a marketing campaign, because that's what it is. You're marketing this opportunity out to the general public. And so you have to fight all the other noise, right? The marketing having been done by, e-commerce or products to, Instagram lives. Like you're battling all these different things. And so, for me, I had a great team around me, some great advisors and some of our board to be able to really look at and put together a real strategy, right? And what's going to get people moving, right? What's going to get them interested, and also understanding our audience, right? Like the way that I talk to, an accredited investor who has a portfolio of 30 companies, and like it's a very different thing from somebody who, doesn't have any investors. This is, I think, probably without knowing the real data or any specific numbers, I'd imagine that, at least half, just based on the conversations I was having, half of them, this was like their first investment ever, right? And so needing to kind of meet them where they are and talk about the opportunity in a way that is understandable. I think the one thing that we had going for us is that our product in and of itself is very interesting to a consumer, right? On the consumer level, right? people want to use the platform, engage with their favorite athletes, donate. And so it was pretty easy, if you will, to kind of explain the product. And when you got people excited about your product, right? You got a lot of people that get excited about products, right? But there's usually never an opportunity to invest, right? And so we kind of bridge that gap to say, hey, let's get you excited about what we're doing, right? First of all. Second of all, let's get you excited even about who's involved, right? Myself as a founder, diverse team, talking about their background. If you just looked at that, right, even at the basic consumer level, right, you're engaged, you love it, like, man, this is great. And then you add on, hey, now you can invest. Right now, again, most people may not know about kind of what that means. It's not like Shark Tank, it's not like some of the things that are out there that people have the misperception. So there was a bit of educating that needed to happen. And my team and I, we came up with a great strategy. We were running live webinars, right, to where we can give people the opportunity to come in 15, 20 minutes and break down everything that we're doing and leave them with that information in a way that we felt was very digestible. And I think it worked tremendously well for us.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, I would agree. I mean, I remember seeing it, and I think you guys raised over $300,000. I mean, so yeah, I think it was wildly successful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. We actually adjusted the strategy, kind of halfway through, and that's when we really started to see the pickup. Because again, I went in not necessarily knowing what that would be like or how we would approach. Or what the best way was. And so it was a learning lesson. And like any innovator, any founder, like you always got to be ready to pivot, ready to adjust and iterate. If you go in dead set on what you're going to do and you're not looking at the data, then you're biz down the drizz down, as I like to say. And so, for us, we were able to do that. And, we actually became, and I was very proud of this kind of, milestone. We became the most successful crowdfunding campaign on Republic led by a Black founder. I think, we hit the exact amount was about $327,000. I think the previous record was around 230 or 250. So I was happy to kind of take that to the next level. Now, in general, my good friend Dawn Dixon is killing it from a overall crowdfunding standpoint. She's hit the $1 million max 2 times now.
Saw that on Popcom, right?
Yeah, Popcom. So if you're unfamiliar, if you're uninitiated, go check that out. It's hard to get in now, but I just wanted to shout her out because that's who inspired me, right? Anybody listening to this and see like, man, I want to now look into equity crowdfunding based on what Win-Win did. Just know that I did that based on what Don had did, right? And I think that's what it's really about, is just showing that this thing is possible. It's a great avenue, but it is the work. And Don even helped give me some great insights on what she was doing that helped her get to that point. And we did some of those things, and literally in the last 24 hours, we raised over 100,000. So it was some great momentum, and I was very proud of that.
That's awesome. So one thing that you mentioned, I'm gonna pass the mic to CDG. One thing that you mentioned, I think was a key word, was pivot. And so, for entrepreneurs that are in, sports tech, esports, or whatever industry they're in, that's one thing that I feel like that is so critical for entrepreneurs to realize when they need to be able to pivot. So can you kind of speak on, what it means as far as, pivoting in this space of being an entrepreneur, and why that's so critical to continuing to have success, and realizing if you need to hit the brakes on something, or if you need to, basically go on something else to make sure that, you're still relevant. So can you kind of speak on, what that really means from an entrepreneurship perspective?
Yeah, man, absolutely. We've been in the game now just around 4 years. And there's been several of these pivots, right? And what I've now learned as I kind of taken my bumps and bruises as a founder and battled through a lot of different things and have matured as a founder, what I've learned is that pivots are actually great, right? And now I get excited about a pivot because whereas earlier on, you look at a pivot or you're more resistant to the pivot because it's not aligned with what my original baby was, right? Like my idea, right? Like where you felt so passionate about it, like this is it. And I challenge founders, early on in that process, not to be so glued and tied emotionally to that actual original idea, right? Because it is almost guaranteed that that thing will change. I think I'll give you a quick side note story. When I was in that first like 6 months of after we went live, we had just raised $1 million and like we're ready to go. And we launched and like got smacked with some realities of like, nah, that ain't it. You know what I mean? And we ended up having like, it was a harsh reality that I had to face. Like, man, this isn't working the way that I thought it was. And like had everybody excited, investors, the media, everybody's excited, and then boom, it's not happening. And I was, I was like, man, what are we gonna do? And I remember talking to one of our investors, and I was a little nervous, to be honest. Like, man, I got to go to this guy who my first time out the gate, I raised a bunch of money, and now I got to go back and say, it's not working. But then he put me at ease by basically saying, look, like, yeah, we expected that. Of course, like we hoped you hit a home run right out the gate, but the reality is that's not the case, right? You're going to have to figure it out. And he was like, I think he told me a stat, somewhere around 17 to 20% of startups are what they started off as. Right, which means 80% nearly are changing in some form or fashion. It may be a small pivot in the model. It may be a completely opposite thing that you're doing now, but in between or somewhere in between, right? But you're changing. And the reason I get excited about those pivots now is because all that means is you're getting in enough data to tell you what's working and what's not working, right? And the pivot is just doing more of what's working and less of what's not working. Right. And so when you're talking about these pivots, I also interchange that term with iterations. So we're iterating on the model, right? And we're iterating based on data, right? Now there's quantitative and there's qualitative, right? If you're getting feedback from users about XYZ that doesn't work or doesn't work as well, right? Maybe maybe it's going okay, but once you take that qualitative in and you make a change, now boom, it's even better. So, we had a recent pivot and I again, with this new thought process and understanding, I was over the moon excited. I said, yes, like, because we figured it out. We got enough data in, we figured it out, what this next thing is that we're really confident about. So, I encourage and challenge, founders early on in particular to not be so married to it. Get as much data in as you can. And really it's your ability to get to those pivots faster, right? And getting to those iterations, because I tell people, startup success, like startup game in the beginning, first few years is not about reaching success, right? It's about staying alive long enough to where you figure it out, and now boom, you make enough pivots to now you're off to the races. Where unfortunately a lot of startups die, right? They fold even before they get to that point. So you should look at finding that next pivot, again, based on data as a positive thing.
I like I'll jump in. I like the way you talk about pivoting. It's almost like refining, if you will.
Right. Right.
It's getting to the point where you've refined your model and you feel really confident about what your goals are and how you're going to hit them. Even I think, and sometimes it probably surprises you and ends up becoming, I would imagine, even more successful than what you were planning on, right?
Absolutely. And that's why, you brought up a good point about goals and metrics. Like, you need to have something to measure against to know what is working and if that is actually working at the level that you set out, and how you adjust to get towards that goal. And to your point, you find yourself operating in a way that you didn't even imagine when you started. And it's a whole other animal. So yeah, it's a fun process. Just got to be able to go through those bumps and bruises and get to it.
No, it's good to hear. It's good to hear from someone with as much experience as yourself, because I've gone through it as well. You're like, hey, that wasn't the game plan, especially with COVID, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes you wonder. It kind of vet. You're basically vetting in real time.
Yeah.
But speaking on like refining and kind of evolving the company. One thing I wanted to ask you about was just building your team. I know, you shared your story earlier, which I think is phenomenal, man. We've been friends for a little while now, and we have a lot of the same friends from the same area. So, that's always, at this point, real quick, you become family in this city. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was just, talking about your story and how you evolved, from, the move and the collegiate world to the pro world to the business world, and then moving, geographically, all for this, better sake of your company. How do you know, who are the key players that you need to bring in on board, because when you think about a young company that's starting up and, they may only have, enough budget for one, sometimes two, sometimes, then there's a third, hopefully it grow. How did you figure out, or, maybe some things that you found through error, who you needed on your team early, especially as a tech startup?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I feel like that's again, as I've learned and continued through this process, it's team, and like just the element of team is like one of the hardest, if not, I'd argue probably the hardest thing about building a company in general, but a tech company specifically, and startup, because, we all four of us can have the exact same idea, right? And the outcome of that idea isn't even going to be based on our individual abilities. It's going to be on the teams that we put together, right? And it's going to for sure be four different outcomes, right? And it's going to be on Nate's ability to, like, what team he gets together and his own ability within that team, right? It's going to be different outcomes. And so, that team part is so critical, especially early on, right? And to your point, the startup conundrum is always having the need but not having the money or the resources, typically, when you're starting off, particularly as we're talking about minority founders. That is like the biggest hurdle, right? Is knowing what you need and needing the resources typically to get that, because just, generally not having the kind of friends and family around that we'd be able to have relative to others. So with that said, the way that and I'm speaking from a place of real experience, having fumbled the ball several times in this field. So, like, this isn't like aspirational. Like, I'm telling you what doesn't work because I went through that, right? And I just give a couple quick, side stories where, like, for example, when I first started, right, and I was fortunate enough, and then I realized how unique it was. I was able to raise a significant amount of money, and right away I went and started just hiring people. Right, I went and got 10, 11 people full time in Silicon Valley, on my team, and we hadn't even launched yet. Right, we hadn't even really run any real processes to, like, validate the products in a deep way. Right, we ran some surveys and some other stuff, which I know a lot of founders like, oh, we got surveys and people said they would do this. Like, nah, that don't work, bro. When that debit card come out, like, now you really starting to understand who's gonna do what and when. And so that was one big thing. And there wasn't a process. That's the other thing. There has to be a process in place. Whenever you're bringing somebody on, whether it's early or later in the game, you have to have some sort of process involved in making those decisions, right? Because a lot of times we make these kind of, I'm just using my gut, or I kind of like this person, right? And so you got to have that process. And then equally important that I found was having somebody else involved, from an advisor standpoint. Right, and if you're fortunate enough to have investors, right, put them to work. Right, that's what I challenge entrepreneurs to do. If somebody's writing you a check, it's in their best interest to utilize every skill and talent that they have to help you out. Now, if they make it clear on the front end, hey, I'm gonna give you this money, but I'm hands off, then that's one thing. But if it's not that, you should certainly be saying, hey, I have somebody that I'm considering. Can you take a look? Can you talk to them for 20 minutes? And you'd be surprised at how much they'd be able to help you out in terms of making these different decisions. Not that they need to tell you what to do one way or the other, but I look at it as data points, right? The more data points you have, the more well-informed you are when you can make a decision, which means you'll likely make a better decision. So if you're operating typically off your own one data point, which is you, then you're likely going to have some decision mistakes, right? Versus, hey, I got 4 other people, so that's 5 data points in total. Now I get to make the decision based on that. So very important in terms of building a team is having a process, and then having people like advisors and board members or investors around you. And even if it's not investors and you haven't raised money, having somebody as a friend, right? If you're hiring an engineer and you know one or somebody in that realm, right? Or you need to go seek that, right? Like going after technical advisors, like seeking what you need, even if you can't hire them. Like we've done that where we've, budget where they are is a lot higher than what we were able to do at the time. And so we got creative and say, hey, you like what we're doing. We can't pay you that amount, but would you be willing to come on as an advisor with equity? Then boom, they're down for that. And now I can leverage them to say, hey, can you talk to this consultant that we're considering? So there's some creative ways that you can get what you need and build the team that you need at that time. Last thing I'll say is, and I heard this, is hire slow, fire fast. Right. And that's something that, again, I did not do. I hired fast and fired slow. and it cost me a lot. It cost me a lot of time and money and some difficult conversations. But I learned that lesson, took that lump, and now have continued on. And we're in the process actually about to start rebuilding a team internally. And really, we leverage consultants now a lot better. Like right out the gate, I thought you just had to hire people straight up W-2, boom, full salary. Like, nah, you don't do that. Don't do that. So again, take it from me. There's some creative ways that you can get people that you need to help you in what you're doing without kind of the assumption of I have to hire them full time. One of those examples is a fractional executive, right? We have a fractional CFO right now that, just in terms of how that works, you get kind of the high level C-suite type of person in that experience, but hence the name fractional. You're only working with them for a set amount of hours, which typically costs you a lot less than having to hire that person. So just a couple quick examples of how you build that team and what you need in a more creative way that I think a lot of early first-time founders just simply don't know.
Yeah, that's some great stuff. Definitely made some of those same mistakes along the journey. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this. So you got the infamous thinking cap on. Can you? I know it's a story behind it. So can you share with us what that story is behind thinking cap? Because it's something that, I know we know why you wear it, but our listeners, our audience, they might not know. So can you enlighten them on the reason behind the thinking cap?
Yeah,
I would also say I don't think I've ever seen Mike take it off.
I sleep in it. The thinking cap is something that, is really a mindset. For me, it's a mindset. And my mom, always said, look, if you want, and I think a lot of parents or grandmas, big mama would say, hey, put that thinking cap on, or you need to, and really what it represents is just the mindset of like, how are you approaching the world, right? How are you looking at different things, right? And for me, when I got into tech, now, mind you, I didn't even know what Silicon Valley was before 2013. I didn't know what a tech startup was, right? If I'd known that, which is a whole nother conversation, I would have been doing things a lot differently. Like I said, I went to Duke. I was 4.0 coming out of high school. So I would have been more in that field. But nonetheless, once I found out, I was like, hold on. And the thing that I found out was, again, innovation, solving problems, right? And that's just how you think, how you view things in the world. I don't like this keyboard, right? For example, and it's like, everybody can recognize that, right? But then what do you do? How do you think about the solution? How do you think about solving that problem? So the thinking cap for me was something that I wanted to bring into a tangible form, right? And say, like, it's not just a mindset. I'm going to show it as well, right? It's I got my thinking cap on, I'm about business right now. Like, I'm thinking about how to win, right? And now I kind of have a little if you want to win in life, you got to have your thinking cap on at all times. And so we may even make those available for people to to purchase, you know what I mean? But not in all seriousness, it stemmed from that, right? And I give a lot of praise to my mother, who raised me with that kind of thinking, right? And I was actually just catching up with her, in light of everything that's going on in our world with George Floyd, talking about how I was even able to overcome certain circumstance because of how she ingrained in my mind how I need to think about the world and my position in it, and the fact that I can do anything, right? And so, the thinking cap is a real representation of that, and it's grown into part of being Win-Win's brand, because that's we're all about winning. And as I said, we want to win in life, you got to have the thinking cap on.
You know what? This is probably a little too deep, but it's interesting the way you position life decisions. And the thinking cap, essentially, you're thinking about the position or where you could be, or how vulnerable you are, and those things. And I think it's but to be honest, I mean, you're really you're representing the business side of it, and I think that's a big key that a lot of startups and entrepreneurs forget. It's like, don't put yourself in that situation. Think about the future. Position yourself, as a major corporation. Don't think now. Don't think, small-minded. Think big. Think long-term. Think legacy. Think enterprise. And really, you'll find that a lot of times you won't fall into a lot of the traps that some of the short-minded folks or companies do. They think about what's this month, what's this week, not what's 4 quarters from now, what's 2 years from now. So no, I love it, man. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I take from it. And I love the story, man. As soon as you're down to sell me 4 of them, I'll take 4.
No, I got HTX. I got y'all. I'm gonna set y'all out with 3, for sure, and make sure y'all got those thinking caps on, because I know you already embody the mindset. So we got to make sure folks know what time it is. So we'll make sure we get you some for sure.
Already.
My last follow-up was just I wanted to kind of provide some time to show, like, kind of what Chris just mentioned, like what are some of the current initiatives or future initiatives that Win-Win is seeking to pursue, like investment or looking for talent or inroads to new clients.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things, quite honestly. We'll be going out for our, another round here very soon. Not on the equity crowdfunding route at this time, but we will be looking, because we haven't raised a formal round here in Houston. So, I certainly am going to be looking into, or look forward to, continuing to meet, the VCs and the super angels and the different folks in the ecosystem that, are looking to invest in high growth startups. So that's one thing. We're also going to be growing our team. We're going to be looking for some real key players, some all-star players. And I'm excited to really tap into the talent that's here in Houston, because that's where I want to grow the team.
Love it. Putting on for the city.
There we go.
In closing, I want to say thanks for taking time to talk to me, Chris, Ash. Love it.
No, my pleasure. And again, to you 3, phenomenal work. Watching from afar and being involved as much as I can. And obviously we have a relationship even outside of our companies, and just helping each other, lifting as we climb. You know what I mean? Making different connections. Just even individually, y'all have made connections and that made our transition, both personally, my family, right, and even professionally in the company, that made our transition down here a soft landing. And I appreciate you 3 gentlemen individually and collectively, and look forward to continuing to grow, learn together, and win together.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
Brother, we appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Y'all.
We'll definitely be in touch.
No doubt.
All right.
All right, one.
Peace.
Peace.
All right, guys.